So we are here for attendance tips. So Ferris Bueller's Day Off, if you remember that movie of back in the day, he was taking attendance, and of course Ferris was out doing his own thing. So we're going to go through some tips to hopefully make things a little bit easier for you. So those of you that don't know me or don't know my face, I am Shelley Baltic here at TCCSA with Rebecca also in the Zoom meeting. She will be helping with the chat and so forth, or any questions that I might not be able to answer. She is here as well, and we're kind of teaming up with some of these topics because with Sherry being gone, we're trying to tackle all of this. So. Be patient with us as we are learning these as well. So I did put in the chat the tiny URL for today's presentation. I did send it out late. Sorry. I've been working on it and trying to tweak things. Sherry had a presentation, but I wanted to make it more of my own. Um, and my background was gradebook, so you guys will see I am going to pull in some things in gradebook so you can see that side of things and what the teachers are doing and how it affects you. Okay, so I am going to get out of the presentation. I'm going to put that in the chat one more time for anyone that came in after I pasted that. But you have that presentation that you guys can print out and do what you need. I'm going to go into the live presentation so we can work on attendance. And hold on, my computer, it will freeze up on me multiple times. Okay, so looking at this, a few things that I do want to talk about first is some of these resources that we are going to talk about are going to be listed in the quick link. So when we're talking about the daily attendance list, that will be in here. And then there are some other tips and tricks down here in the documentation. These are a little bit older, but they are still important. Now, again, this is just a quick 1 hour Zoom on tips. We will have full-fledged attendance trainings later on throughout the year. So the first thing we are going to talk about is absence types. Absence types are the important thing for attendance to be taken properly. And you will notice different places in student information, you'll see it called absence or absences, or like in the analytics hub, in some of the reports, it will call it attendance. So just be aware if you are the person that is using the go-to menu, make sure you're typing in that correct wording, whether it's attendance or absence. So I am going to use my go-to menu to type in my absence types. So there's two ways that you can create your absence types. One is at the district level. So these would be items that everybody is going to use district-wide. So for example, in our test district, we have our medically excused and our medically partially excused absences because this is what we want everybody to use within the district. So you can see those are listed here under the district level, and some of you might not have access to the district level. So somebody else would have to add these. Then if I switch to the building level, which you would all have access, um, you are going to see the ones that are available to your individual building. Now, notice the difference with the ones that were added at the district level versus the ones that are at the building level. So I cannot modify these at the building level. I would have to go back to the district if I have access. So when you are creating any of these absence types, a few things to remember. One, these do integrate over to gradebook. So there is an absence type maintenance in gradebook as well. And this is what the teachers might see. And I will show you that in a minute. But yes, they might see all of these listed. The other thing is this. um, this description column. Use this description column to be precise. So you can see here in my demo database, it just says college visit, or tardy and tardy. Well, one thing that you can do with these descriptions is add something important. So, for example, when we're looking at tardies, these descriptions need to have, or the tardies have to have either a time in or a time out. So that's important to know. So maybe you have a sub for the day, and if somebody's marking tardies, you want to make sure that they're including those descriptions. So if I edit, so I can come to edit. So instead of just saying, okay, the description is a tardy, I can say, um, enter the time in or time out, and then I can save it. So now when I'm looking at my absence types, I'm going to see that description. So I know that there needs to be a time in or a time out. So let's look at these and see how they are built. Okay, some of these can be used for our absence is for HB 410. So that would be in the absence group. Okay, so we're just going to look at an excused. So if I click on my excused tardy, this is what my screen is going to be set up. My absence code, what I'm going to name it, and then, of course, that description. So in this case, it could be, excused absence, maybe for our medically excused, but the qualifier is the important area. How is it going to calculate, or is it going to calculate? So our absence, of course, can be a full day, but it is absent time away from the building. Are late and or partial, that is part of the time away, both of those will have to have either a time in or a time out when you are modifying the student record. And then our non-absence would be something that would be not counted against the student's attendance, such as a field trip, such as a religious holiday, things like that. And then here is our is excused. So, of course, things like our out of school suspension, our unexcused absences, things like that are going to be unchecked. These absence groups here will also show in gradebook. So make sure that you are checking them appropriately. And this is how it determines where and what it should be calculated as. So for medical is not counted against the student's excessive absences. Um, Out of suspension is not counted towards his habitual absences, but it does not count towards truancy. So it is going towards that habitual absence, but not truancy. So this is where it is populating what that is. It does not look at the name, it looks at the qualifier. So what type of absence is it going to be, and then the absence group that is provided here. The use for daily attendance, of course, that's what we are taking, and this is how the teachers are going to take it in gradebook. The period attendance, I don't know any of our districts that are using student information for period attendance. Most of the teachers take period attendance within gradebook, and it stays within gradebook there. This report to EMIS, this is a non-functional field. They are trying to get that removed. A lot of districts just check it because it's habit, but it doesn't matter one way or another if it is checked or not. If you have an absence type that you no longer are using, you can mark it as inactive by checking it. So another thing when you are working with your absence types, these will carry over year to year. So when we do SYI, these will all carry over. If you need to make changes to an absence type, once SYI is completed, you can start working in the future school year, and it will not affect the current school year. You don't want to make modifications after the beginning of school to some of these absences that have been used in the current school year. So let's look at gradebook for a second. So when a teacher is in gradebook, they are taking daily attendance. So this is the teacher's dashboard screen. They could be taking it from, um, when their home screen, but they take daily attendance. So when they take daily attendance, it automatically populates into student information as soon as they click on the save button. So if I am a teacher, I click on my drop down arrow so I can take attendance. You'll see I only have that option of unexcused. So that is populating over from student information. It comes into gradebook as that absence type, and it is allowable for teachers to use. You'll see some of those other ones, such as unexcused absence, tardies, things like that. The teachers can't use because at this point in time in the morning, they don't know exactly why they are absent. So then the office goes through and double checks each of the students to set it to the appropriate attendance. So once I hit this for dandruff, I'm going to hit save. You will see for the teacher, it becomes uneditable. So I can no longer change this. So if I come back in here and I find my student, if I look at his attendance for the day, so I'm going to student attendance and my school absences. You'll see here is my unexcused absence for the day. Now, the teachers can't change that, but you as office staff can. I can do that right here by clicking on the edit record. So if I need to change this, and so if this becomes medically excused, or if it's a field trip, a college visit, whatever it might be, if I click on this absence type code, so we'll do a medically excused. It's thinking. Okay, you can see it's changed here in student information. If I go back to my gradebook screen, you'll see that it changes for the teacher in the gradebook screen. The teachers also see this on the dashboard. So whatever those absent typed codes are that you have put in, that is what the teacher sees on their class dashboard. So those match up with our absence types. So you can see my medically excused is ME, and that is what the teacher saw in the gradebook. Okay, moving on. Oop. We're going to look at those partial qualifiers and those tardies. So you can see here I have the qualifier column. So anything that is an absence can be a full absence. So they're out of the school for the building. Now, you might not know this if they're going to come in at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but you can mark them as a full absence. Anything that is a full absence does not need a time in or a timeout, but it can. So it is optional. So let's look at that daily attendance list. So there's multiple ways to get to it. So from my student information home screen, again, I can go under TCCSA and daily absence list. Some of the districts have those individually or within SIS. I can go to my SIS attendance and my daily absence list. So looking at these for today's absences, I can see that these have all been marked as full absences. Um, when I am looking at a student, I can change these. So if this is not an excused absence, maybe it was a tardy, I do have to include a time in and or a time out. So you'll notice here that there is a box that says if you do not include the time in or time out, for the late or partial, they will not be counted against the student's absence threshold. There is a report that we are going to look at later called the attendance process warning. And if there is not a time in or a timeout for anything that is considered partial, then or partial and or tardy, then it will flag it on that warning. Okay. So, and then if it is a partial, let me go back a day. If it is a partial, I have one set up here, you'll see that you have the time in and time out. One of the biggest errors that we see, and we'll pull that up in a little bit too, is the time in and time out. It is either flipped um, or sometimes the AM and PM is changed. So instead of arriving at 11:20 AM, the student is arriving at 11:20 PM, which is not a school time. So again, that will show up on that attendance process warning report. Okay, next, when we are working with absences, in order for it to calculate correctly for House Bill 410, we need to make sure that we are including lunches. So when we're looking at lunches, we are going to make sure that our courses are set up as a lunch. And this is all grade levels. So if I go into my courses, there is a lunch type called lunch. So it needs to make sure that is marked in that on the miscellaneous tab. So if you're adding a course and or if you need to modify the course, okay, one thing we have to do is we are going to make sure that our miscellaneous is marked as the course type lunch for the appropriate grade levels. So if you're elementary, the middle levels, or high school levels. And then the other thing we also want to do is we want to make sure that it is not reporting to EMIS. So lunch does not report to EMIS, and it also does not calculate in the student's school day. So then once we have our lunch course created, then we're going to look at our course sections. So our course sections need to match up with the times that the student will be having lunches. Because if the student leaves or returns during their lunchtime, that period of time is not counted towards the student's absence. So if I look at my courses, and you can pull up whatever the course name is or your lunch course type, you will see here that I have two sections of lunch. And I know a lot of high schools, you have like a 5A, a 5B, a 5C. That is completely fine. Within the course details, it's going to show the meeting time, that it's a fifth period or sixth period. If I look at my record itself, on the meetings time tab, I'm going to pick the appropriate meeting time. So again, if I have 5A, 5B, 5C, I want to make sure I have that marked for the appropriate lunch section. And in this case, we have the lunch section match up with the lunch period. Once we have our course sections, then we're going to want to make sure that a student has a lunch. Oh, nope, before that, I missed something. We need to make sure our periods of the day are filled in. So if I go to my periods of the day, and I always forget the word the in there, and I forgot the S. You will want to make sure that the lunch time is filled in for each rotation day. This is a big mistake where you have Monday on there, but you might forget Friday. But you'll see for each of the days of the week, I have to have those lunch times recorded on that day. It does not matter if your other meeting times are have a start time and end time. That would only be if you are taking period attendance through student information. And again, most of our districts, or as far as I know, all of our districts, period attendance is taken through gradebook. So that is important to double check to make sure each of the days of the week has the correct meeting times. Okay. These should carry over during SYI, but I know sitting in a couple of Sherry's sessions once in a while, they don't. So then, of course, they would have to be double checked and marked for the following school year during that SYI process. Unless you have changes to your lunch, then of course you would want to change those during that SYI process. Now that we know that it's marked from, so for example, fifth period is 10:45 to 11:15, and sixth period is 11:15 to 11:45. If I pull up a student in context, and I'm going to look at their schedule, I can see here that Tim Burr has sixth period lunch. So that was 11:15 to 11:45. So if he leaves at 11 o'clock and returns at noon, he is not missing an hour of school. He is only missing a half hour, missing from 11 to 11:15. He does not get counted for his absence from 11:15 to 11:45, and then again 15 minutes from 11:45 to 12 o'clock because he was gone during his lunchtime. So, other things that you'll want to check to make sure that attendance is calculating correctly. One thing that we want to look at is our master calendar. I'm not doing very good spelling today. So, looking at the master calendar, there's two things that you're going to look at here. First, if your attendance is not calculating, you want to make sure that you have the correct AM and PM if you have a time in, time out, and that it falls between the daily start time, which is 7:30, and the daily stop time, which is 2:30. So for example, earlier I said sometimes people put PM instead of AM. If it was 11:20 PM, that would be outside of the stop time, so it would not calculate in their attendance. The other thing that you will want to look at is the actual day type. So if I look here and it says something else besides school day, it will not be calculating it towards that student's attendance. For example, September 23rd was changed to a Calamity Day because I'm using my nephew as an example. He had multiple days off because of the hurricane. So that was a normal school day. It had now been changed to a Calamity Day. So if a student absence showed on September 23rd, maybe because they had a pre-planned vacation, that would not count towards their absence because the actual day type column was changed to a non-attending day. So that's always one place to check. The next thing is to look at the sub-calendar. So depending if your student is on the default calendar or a sub-calendar. So if I'm looking at my sub-calendars, so we have our default in here. A good example of our sub-calendars would be early dismissal for seniors that get to leave early, or a calendar for seniors because they get out of school early versus the rest of the grade levels, or students that are arriving late because they have first period off. So if we're looking at a sub-calendar, some things that you're going to want to look at is what the start time or the stop time is. These only need to be entered if they are different from the master calendar. So if it is just for the seniors that are getting out 3 days or 5 days early, you would not have a different start time or stop time. You would just have a different calendar end date. If the student is leaving early, in this case, they leave at 1:45, then that is when you would put in the stop date. If you have a daily start time or a daily stop time, no matter what, your hours per day should still be the full hours. So you are not changing it here. The computer will do the calculation based on what you put here. So when the calculations run for attendance, it will look at the sub-calendar first to see if there's any start time or end time. Then it will look at the percent of day on the student's profile FD tab. But the hours per day should always remain the same. So it knows in the attendance calculation that it is now stopping at 1:45. Okay. So looking at, so we saw our teachers are taking attendance. That is coming through to student information. Then we have to go in and modify these descriptions so that they are appropriate for what the absence is. So once we go in to modify one of our absences, oops, wrong screen. I'm going to show you a little tip. If you are in your I want to menu and you want to get to that student's absences, a lot of people are like, I wish the school absence was listed in the I want to. A little tip is you can go to the student absence intervention. Even though we're not going to add the intervention here, there is a link right here to the student absences and it will take you directly into that student. So now I can see my absences for the student and I can modify as necessary. So if I want to modify from the student, I can modify here. So if I need to change something, I can modify it. I can change it from unexcused to excused. I can put in a time in or timeout and or a comment. Okay. I can also modify from my daily attendance screen. So if I am working here, working with the student, I can modify from here by clicking on the pencil to edit the record. So if this needs to be changed, I can change that. Now, a few things that I want to point out on the daily absence list. One, I can add a student absence from here. So if I have a student that is absent today, I can type in their name and they will populate, or if you know their student number. So it will search last name, first name, or student number. So I can pick that student and now I can say add an absence for the student. So once I do that, now it is going to bring me in the absence event screen where I can add those details. So if the student was absent all day, tardy, whatever it might be. Another little tip, so we're going to add in a tardy. Um, I'm going to put the absence reason as other. You can absence reason and absence notes are optional. You do not have to put those in because it is a tardy. So and or that partial, I have to have my time in. So if they were just a little bit late, they got there at 7:55 a.m. and I can put in a comment. So, what I want to point out is if I put these comments in, I want to point out that some districts, those comments might show on parent access. There is a setting that I talk about in the summer when we do gradebook cleanup. If that setting is not set to hide, these comments will show. For example, my student souffle. She has a partial absent, and I have a comment. It is showing here, left from the nurse's office, excused. So I just want to make you aware of that depending on what you are putting in those comment areas. So it was brought to my attention by a district that they were putting in comments kind of for the office, not knowing that the parent was able to see it. So whoever your progress book point person is or your PA admin, there is a district setting in parent access to hide comments from parent access. So just again, be aware of that. The other thing that I want to show is, so for example, maybe a couple kids were absent because there was a train, and you're going to put in their absences real quick. So we want to use this over and over. They were all coming in at the same time. So if I want to keep this information in there, I can say retain the values. And then once I hit save, it is going to save that. I can pull up my next student. So whoever my next student was. Um, so if Mickey also has this, you'll see that it automatically populates that information. So then I can just save in new. Okay, so that's one way you can do multiple things at the same time with the same information. Once I uncheck it and save it, then the next time it'll go back to the default. Okay, or I can click on the show defaults and it will take it back right now. So another thing that we can do to show a lot of absences is um, the absence fast entry. Okay, so we're going to switch to that. I'm just going to put in fast entry. This one is one that's called attendance, not absence. So it's attendance fast entry. Um, so this allows you to search for a group of kids. So this is great for a group of kids that called in, maybe grade levels going on a field trip. So you have those kids. Maybe at the JVS, one of the home schools has a snow day, but the JVS is still in session. So you can search by the homeschool IRN and pull up those kids and mark them absent. So we'll go through and pull in some of these kids. So say they're in a field trip. So we're going to do a field trip. And then we're going to pull in our 10th graders. Okay. If I say preview students, it's going to show all my students and I can pick all the students that are marked in here. So if all of them are going on the field trip, it's a complete class group. I can check them all. If they're not all going on there, I can go through and spot check them. So if I'm looking here, Terry was our one that was tardy. So that was already marked in there. So here is another option. So maybe the 10th graders are going, but you know one student's doing a college visit and two 10th graders called in sick this morning. So I can still mark them all, but I have this vary absence types by student. If I check that, I can click on preview and then it's going to pull up an additional column. So now not only I'm able to mark all of them going on a field trip, but now I can mark them individually. So maybe Terry was late enough that he can't go, so he's going to be marked as absent. And Marty, he is sick, so he is not going at all. So he's an excused absence. And Jed is going on a college visit. So then when I save this, all of them would populate correctly for that daily attendance list. I did put a note. I actually just learned this not too long ago, but House Bill 214 is for religious expression days. So right now there is not a way to mark that in the system. So when you are doing it, you should have an attendance type that is for religion, and then it would be the absence level of absence would be non-absence. So you don't want to count that against their tardies because of the religious expression days. So they're working on it. It's new in the system, so they're trying to figure out how to get that to work. If you have any questions on that, you can always let me know. Okay. Before we go into reports, does anybody have any questions of anything that I went over? I didn't see anything in the chat unless Rebecca already answered it.
No questions in the chat, but you can add them now.
Okay, then I'm going to keep moving on. So I do want to bring up this area because it is in your SIS attendance. It is your SIS attendance reports. Most of these reports have not been updated to hours to accommodate HB 410. So just be aware of that. But that doesn't mean you can't use any of these reports. They just don't have the attendance hours like we need. But some of them are very helpful. For example, our daily office student absences, which is your R307. So this one will show um, each student and the absence type that has been applied to them. So I have some of these ran already so you can see them. So we don't have to sit here and wait for them. So you can see for today, I ran this earlier, but I have Chris Bacon. It shows that he has a full absence, what the absence reason was. Remember, those absence reasons and those absent notes are not required. Those are optional, but they do populate on the screen. And then I had a student that had a partial excused absence here, souffle, and what time she left. So it does have her, it does list the time in or time out. Okay, so it doesn't show any totals or anything like that. It just shows the daily absence types. So again, that one could be very helpful. We're going to close out of that. The other one you might want to look at between these two is the student absence search detail, which is the 309A. And then we also have the 309B. So I will show you what those look like. The 309A allows you to search by a date range if you want. So you can pick a specific range, or you can just do it, for a day. Okay. Um, and it lists it, each student is on a separate page. So if you're looking, at the end of the 9 weeks and you want a detailed report of each student's absences, this is going to populate it. Again, it is not going to show the hours, but it will show that it is a full day absence or a half day absence, and it'll show what absence type was used for that student. The other one is the um, 309B. And this one is a summary. It's basically per grade level. So again, it is not showing those absence hours, but it is just a good summary to see how many absences per grade level that we are dealing with. So if I look, it's all my students, how many absences or partial absences, and then it will show that total at the bottom. And it'll go through each of my grade levels. So there's my 11th grade and my 12th grade. So it's just kind of a summary of each student and then the total for the grade level. One suggestion that we have been told is do not use this perfect attendance report because it does not calculate properly because it is not set up for HB 410. So with that being said, we are going to look at our analytic hub. So in our analytics hub, there are multiple reports that you can use. So I'm gonna bring this over because there's multiples, and we'll talk about them for a second. I also did provide, so when you guys go into the slideshow, I do have links. Remember, if you are pulling anything from the Learning Center, so any of these links that are from that Learning Center, the help area, you have to be signed into student information first before you click on this link. If you click on the link first, it's going to ask you to log in and you will be unsuccessful. So make sure you are signed in first and then click the link. So our Analytics Hub report, there's multiples and you can look through all of them. These are just some that I want to point out. Some of these are within the HB 410 areas. Some are just within the absence attendance area. And then you'll see down here are two different reports that are under the EMIS attendance area. So this is a very, very important one, the admission comparison calendar. This is comparing the students' calendars on their student profile, the general tab, and the FD tab to make sure they are the same. If they are not the same, it will throw a red flag at you, so those can be corrected. And then the FD details are going to show any of those intervention events that have happened for that student. Um, and you will see in some of these reports, we say the word summary or we'll say the word detail. Anything that is detailed typically is something that you can export to Excel so you can manipulate it, you can filter it, and so forth. Anything that is a summary, it's just kind of an overview. So it is good to export it as just a PDF so you have that information. Okay, so we're not going to go through all of these because I do have some scenarios that I want to go over, but we're just going to talk about a few things. And I do want to show you this attendance process warning because I did put that student in without a time in or time out with that qualifier of partial and or tardy. So let me move that back out of our way and we're going to look at our analytics hub. So here we have our attendance. So under attendance, you'll see that there's two sections. I have my HB 410. So these are all the reports that are going to populate in hours. So there's a lot in here that you can use. You can collapse this menu. So if I click on the drop down, it's going to collapse it and show me the rest of my attendance reports that I have available. Okay, so if I want to see that again, I can just open it back up and it populates. Remember, as you are working with different reports and it's something that you use often, you can star them. So once you have them starred, they will go into your favorites. Once you have 5, it no longer allows you to star, so you can see my star has disappeared. But if I know that I'm going to be using this attendance process warning, I can unstar one of my 5 and I can restar this. And now it doesn't let me star anymore because I have 5 selected. But I kind of cheat and open up some of these reports without the star. And if I look, then whatever I have used recently is going to populate here in my analytics recent report. So they don't have to be starred, but you're going to see some of those listed here as well. So I kind of like using that too, because then I get a little bit more than 5. So one thing I want to mention when we are working in the analytics hub. So I'm going to go into this attendance process warning. When I go in here, and these take a while to run sometimes, so I'm not going to run all of these. But we'll talk about the ones that I kind of mentioned and what they do. But this is the one I want to show you. So when you're working in these, if I click here for school name, it's only going to populate one, the buildings that you have access to. So if you only have access to the high school, it's only going to show the high school. And it's only going to show the high school if there is some data or somebody that qualifies for this report. If there are no students, if there's nothing on the report, your school name is going to be blank because there's no data to report. So if you're wondering, maybe you're going through this and you're like, why is my ninth grade not showing? I can't select ninth grade. Well, that's because there's no ninth grade students that have data that will populate for this report. So I'm just going to go through here, pick your status. And again, your status will only show for those status codes that have been used for the students that qualify. I'm picking my grade level. This one, if my message is not one of, if I leave it blank, it will pull in all the messages. In my case, I only have one. Um, but if you just want a specific one, then you can change your qualifier or your condition here, and then you can just select the one that you want. But I'm going to leave it blank, which means it would populate all of the messages. So you can see here, this was the one that I added for teriyaki. So he is, on um, October 1st, he has an absence that is excluded because the time in and or the time out is outside of the start time or stop time of the student's assigned calendar. So then what I can do is go back to my student, look at my student absences, and then I can see that on October 1st, because that's what the report said, that his time in was at 8:50 p.m. versus a.m. So I can just go in and modify this, switch it to a.m. No, I should have just typed it in. And then I'm going to save. So now if I go back and try to run that report, he should be gone, but it might not have calculated that fast because I'm going through this pretty fast. Your EMIS coordinators do have a way to force the attendance calculation throughout the day, because it normally runs once a day. But if something is changed or whatever throughout the day, it can be forced if needed. And he's still going to be in here, even though I corrected that. So some of the other reports that we have, so your yearly absence summary. This is a great report. Go back into that. Um, your yearly absence summary is an interactive report. So if I look at this one, and you will see that for each student, I have the ability to have a pop-up box. So let me find Timber here. Where's my Timber? I know he's got absences. Well, we'll just use Terry because he's on here. So if I look at Terry here, if I click on my daily, you'll see it'll pop up a little box. So it's going to show me any attendance for today, if it was excused, unexcused, and so forth. So that's just for him. I can export this if I need to. And then if he has any consecutive, let's see, there's my Timber. Okay. If I have any consecutive, that is going to populate as well. Maybe. Oh, I don't know what I did to him now. Let's look for souffle. I thought I had him set up correctly, but maybe I don't. Okay. I don't know what I did wrong. But each of these will have the little pop-ups. You will also see that each name that is populated is going to have the percent of time at the school. So if any of your students attend the JVS part of the day, it will show what percentage of the day that they are attending your building. That is on the FS standing record of the students on the student's profile. So that is pulling that information. It will also show any of the thresholds that the student has met. So I don't know why. Only the daily is showing up. So you can see here, here's the daily summary. So she's missed 9.67 hours because she had a partial absence, and then she had the full day absence, which was 6.5. And since she is 100% at the district, it would be the 6.5. If the student was 50% of the time at the district, a full day absence would be that 3.25. Okay, so a few scenarios. So let's go through a few scenarios. So first, in inside of the presentation are a list of those suggested analytic hub reports for you to take a look at. I just wanted to point out a couple of those. So the first thing would be a snow day. So, or a calamity day, depending. I know a lot of the southern districts have just had calamity days with the hurricane coming through, all the way through Tennessee. So, multiple states, had a regular school day and needed to change it. So if it is a full snow day, so they called and canceled for the entire day, this can be changed on the master calendar. So if I go to my master calendar, you'll see the actual day type, anything that is listed as a school day, that can be switched to a snow day and or a calamity day. So we're going to go back into September and we're going to look at this and um, we're going to say that September 19th was a calamity day. So that started, the rains and stuff. So we're going to close school. So we're going to click on the pencil. We are not going to change the planned school day type. We are going to change the actual school day type. So it was actually scheduled for a school day, but now it is a snow day, or it's a calamity day, other calamity day. So if I click on that and then I would hit save and it will update it. Okay. So once I have that updated, then it is going to switch my September 19th from a regular school day to that calamity day. So if somebody was marked absent for that day because it was like a pre-planned vacation or a pre-planned sickness, that would no longer count towards their attendance. Scenario B would be we're going to do a 2-hour delay um, because the weather, or we're doing a 2-hour early dismissal. We're going to do the delayed start. So we're going to come in once it gets light outside. So those kids that are driving, the roads are a little bit clearer. So you do not change this on the master calendar here. So for example, we're going to say today is a 2-hour delayed start. Because I needed to sleep in. No, I'm kidding. So when we're looking at it, so today is a planned school day, we're going to leave that alone. So it is not a full entire day like a snow day is. So we're only delaying it. If you change the actual day type here to a calamity day or a snow day, teachers will not be able to take attendance once they come in after that 2-hour delayed start. So what needs to be done in this case is you need to create exceptions. So when you're creating your calendar exceptions, there's two ways to create this. So you can either do it one at a time or you can do it in bulk. My suggestion at the high school level, you'll probably want to do it at bulk. Our elementary, you can probably do it regular because you don't have multiple calendars. Unless you have multiple calendars for your preschool kiddos, then you would want to do bulk as well. So how this works is if I'm going to go into the bulk so you can see how that works. When I go into the bulk, I'm using the master calendar, so the start time and the end time is going to come through. So remember my day was 7:30 to 2:30. Well, now we are going to change our start time to 9:30, and you can type it in. You don't have to use these. But we are now going to start at 9:30. Then what I'm going to do is add my exception. So when I come into my exception, I'm going to click on that and I'm going to say, okay, hey, we had a planned school day, but something happened. So we need to tweak this a little bit. So you can see there's all kinds of different exceptions in here. So, whatever it might be, if it was a teacher day, something, maybe it's a teacher day at the elementary, but not at the high school. So it's only going to affect those, but in this case, we're going to change the high school, and this was an unplanned shortened day, or you could say a weather related shortened day, either or. So if it was a power outage, you might say unplanned. So we'll say the weather related shortened day. And then how many hours? So we're delaying 2 hours. Our normal day is 6.5. Ours are even. So when Sherry set this up, it was nice and even, 6.5 hours and a half hour lunch. Your district is probably different. You might have, excuse me, like 6.53 or, 6.4 something. And your lunches might not be a half hour. They might be, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, whatever it might be. So remember your shortened day is only the instructional time, does not include that lunchtime. So I'm switching from a 6.5 hour day to a 4.5 hour day. I'm going to add and update my exceptions. I need to add the day or days in there. So if you have multiple, snow days or something like that, you can add those in here as well. So I'm just going to add today's date in here for the one date. And if you needed more, if you have, I know my kids have delayed start every Thursday, and that's just for the high school. So I can go through and do a reoccurring for every Thursday that they're delayed an hour. So then I can say use this date. And then this is what's nice about the bulk is down here. I can pick all of the calendars. So I don't have to go through them individually. If I just use the calendar exceptions, not the bulk, then I have to go through each calendar individually that this delayed start is going to affect. And I just click to check all. But we know our non-attending calendar, it doesn't really affect that, but it can go on that anyways. So now I'm going to hit save. It's saved successfully. So if I look at my calendar, so you can see now I have a weather related shortened day. Oh, that's my other one that I used. Let me go to today. So right here is today's that we just added. So, and I am on the default calendar. And then if I switch to any of my other calendars, so if I switch to my early dismissal kids, you're going to see it'll take a second. You'll see that that weather related shortened day is also on there. So now it knows when it runs the attendance calculation that there was a 2 hour delay plus that student gets out early. So it knows how to calculate the attendance for that student. And there's a couple more scenarios in. I know I'm running out of time and I know your time is precious. The third scenario I had was the AM and PM, which we already talked about. Always double check that on the student's school attendance screen to make sure, and also make sure the time in and time out are not switched. Sometimes because they're going out at 9 o'clock and they're returning at 1 o'clock, so the 1 o'clock is the time in. So just make sure that you're putting them in the appropriate columns. And then the fourth scenario that I had is using the EMIS admissions calendar comparison to make sure that the students have the correct calendar in both areas. So if I'm looking at my students, if I get them into their profile, down here is their attendance calendar. So the attendance calendar is default. And then I would also need to look at their FS standing. nope, I'm wrong. Sorry, that's your percent of time. Your FD. And then your reporting calendar also needs to be default. So if for some reason, maybe a senior, their attendance calendar might be on default, but their reporting calendar might be on the senior calendar, you would need to edit this to correct, or whichever one needs to be corrected, you need to edit to make sure that they match. If they mismatch, they will not be counted for attendance. So they would be on the attendance skipped report. Okay. Any questions? I know Rebecca was typing in there. Any questions that I can answer?
Right now, the only question is, where will the recording be?
Um,
Good answer. I
I
thought
have,
about the SIS support page and we could link it there.
yeah, maybe we'll create a link in there or something for our Thinking Thursdays, and we'll just put all the Zoom recordings in there. So that's a great question. I didn't think that far. So I appreciate that. So again, at the end of the presentation that I did put in, I know a couple of you did jump in late, but there is the tiny URL. Please share it with your staff. Also, encourage your staff to attend if they can. Um, as always, if you have questions, support at tccsa.net. That goes to both Rebecca and I and Tim if it's an EMIS question. So, if I'm doing a training, sometimes Rebecca's, looking at help desk or vice versa. So please make sure you're using support versus emailing us individually. And also, when you're putting support tickets in, try to put the student's ID versus the student name because many of the things that we check, it requires the student's ID versus their name. And for privacy purposes, we'd rather have their ID than the name. And just the last note, and thank you for attending our upcoming trainings. I do have more Thinking Thursdays. I'm still trying to come up with some topics. So if you have a topic of interest, please let me know. And also, please let me know feedback if you think these are going to work for you for the school year. October 18th, many of our school districts are out. So we are having a professional development day here and via Zoom. So those are on our event scheduler page. We have stuff, that from gradebook to Dazzle EMIS connection. We also have Canva and safe surfing and, being tech smart. So all of these apply to you. We try to focus on our office staff because a lot of the professional development that's offered throughout the district does not always apply to the office staff. So we wanted to try to accommodate you guys. Next week is report cards, honor rolls, and GPAs. That is the 3-hour in person session if you want to see my face, or you can attend via Zoom as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, feel free to put questions in the chat if you have any last minute ones, but I am going to pause the recording. Have a good rest of your week.